I get out of prison, I still am a neo-Nazi. I mean, to the day I left, still shaved my head, still was involved in all of our meetings, still did everything with my Aryan gang. Just sometimes hung out and played basketball with some of the kids and played cards and dominoes with some of the black kids in our cell block sometimes, more often than other people would, just because I was cool or had a better time sometimes with those guys. Anyway, when I get home from prison, I want to still be a neo-Nazi. This is my biggest thing in life. This is where I identify. This is where I get all my clout and all my pull and all that. Like, this is everything for me. I come home it sounds egotistical, but I'm just trying to set it for you the right way, like almost in a heroish way. Like, I kidnapped an Antifa member, our rival. Like, and I did my time.
This may be the wildest story of teshuva, returning to Judaism, that we've ever told. Frank was a neo-Nazi, kidnapping people, hurting people, and worse. But today, he's a man of religion, talks to Hashem every day, and wears tefillin. His story will give you chills, and it's not over until it's over. Watch and listen to the full thing. You'll hear about Sword to Shackle, a gorgeous organization funding Israel's people, businesses, and soldiers. You'll also hear about my healthy obsession with Twillory. You'll hear about the best way to get your Esrog this year with Esrog Shopper, and also how BitBean is helping businesses have their own revolutions. This episode is in memory of Shimon David ben Yaakov Shleima and Miriam Sarah Bas Yaakov Moshe. Here we go. I'm Yaakov Langer, and you're listening to Inspiration for the Nation. Okay, thank you so much, Frank Meeink, for sitting down to do this. I've been doing interviews for 4 years now. I could confidently say your story is one of the most mind-blowing, so I'm very excited. Could you take us back to your childhood, where you're from, and what it was like?
So yeah, I was born and raised in Philly, South Philadelphia. My mom was a single mom who, struggled to make it at times. I remember being on food stamps and being on welfare sometimes. Then my mom, and I'll tell you, man, one of the most embarrassing things sometimes is when I'd have to go to the local corner deli with food stamps. And man, when you pull out food stamps at the corner deli, you know who comes walking in right behind you? The hottest girl in your neighborhood, and you don't want to pull out food stamps in front of the hot girl. You just don't. He would tell me when I was 12 and 13 that, like, he's kicking me out. You're gone. Like, I don't want you here. And I'm starting a new family with your mother. And it was pretty horrendous. Just to give people just a little taste of what it was like, just what I remember as a kid is he moved in when I was about 9. And when I would go to school every day, I would come home, and before you would get to my house, there was a street called 4th Street in South Philly. And I used to plan on getting hit by a car. Like, I didn't want to die. I just didn't want to go home. And in South Philly, everyone gets hit by cars. It's like the thing to do, because you live in them little, small, narrow streets, just like New York, you know what I mean? Where it's always people zooming around in these little, narrow streets, and you always get hit by, like, your cousin or something, so you can't even sue. You just get hit. And every day I would just go home and plan on being hit by a car. And my body wouldn't let me do it. I'm too fast. I was like a born bred athlete. And anytime that car would come close to hitting me, I'd jet right out of the way every time. And all I did was I felt like the biggest loser. Like, you can't even get hit by a car, you loser. And I was told all the time by my stepdad that I was nothing but a ditch digger, an idiot, you dumb, this and that, you name it. It's just the things I heard every day. And not being able to even get hit by a car, I thought, boy, what a loser. And so eventually one day my stepdad got his way and beat me and told me to pack up my stuff. I did get in trouble at school. I wasn't innocent, but I didn't deserve that. And I had to go pack my stuff and go move with my real dad, who I'd barely seen my real dad. And I loved my real dad. I couldn't wait to, and even though my dad's living situation was a lot worse than my mom's, I still was so willing to take that situation over living in the house with a tyrant and a bully who was a drug addict, alcoholic. So moved in with my dad up in Southwest West Philly. Some of you guys might have heard of West Philly. If you ever watched Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, he talks about it. West Philly, born and raised on the playground. Anyway, that's where I kind of was raised. And I went to an all-black school, fist fought a lot. My dad had like this bar that he kind of managed and ran. And so he just lived his life at the bar. And it was a pretty tough situation. So
you were raised Catholic and you didn't really know much about Jewish people. How did you get into the life of joining a neo-Nazis?
So I'll tell you, there was one thing that happened where when I was a kid growing up, in these little ethnic neighborhoods, all Irish Catholic, all Italian Catholic, Puerto Rican, black neighborhoods, there was always ethnic jokes about each other, right? Just what everyone did. And so I'm not just picking on the Irish for doing this, but there would be things like if you picked up a penny in my neighborhood, what are you, a Jew? And people laugh. Or I would hear things like if my uncle came back from the store and the guy at the store didn't give him the right change back, or he would come back and be like, yeah, Johnny tried to Jew me today. And everybody laugh. Everybody would laugh. And I remember asking my uncle one time when he had said that, and I said, why is that so funny? Like, I wanted to know. I was probably 10 years old at the time. So why is it so funny when you always say Johnny always tries to Jew you? And he starts to tell me. He was like, Frank, the Jews are notorious for money. And he's like, you know what? You'll get the joke when you're older. You'll get the joke when you're older. Well, when I went to my dad's and I was fist fighting with black kids all the time, and Puerto Rican kids too, but mostly black kids, was when race really came in. Like I knew growing up in an Irish Catholic neighborhood that we were just this little thing. But once I had to change schools and I was the minority of the school, I learned real quick about what race is. And that summer, after living with my dad for that 1 year, I went up to the Lancaster, Pennsylvania area, if anyone knows that area, Bucks County, where it was a lot of Amish people. And that's where my cousins who were originally from South Philly, had moved up there. My uncle had, done well for himself and got his family out of the city. And so we would go up there all the time. And I loved being up there. I mean, that was National Geographic stuff. I mean, they really lived without no electricity and they really turned butter. And I was just fascinated. It was totally National Geographic for me. And my cousin who was up there, he was always into like more of the cutting edge stuff, real into punk rock for a while, real into skateboarding for a while. And I really enjoyed hanging out with him. He was a couple years older than me and I really looked up to him. And that summer, after I'm fist fighting with all the black kids at school and trying to make it home safe sometimes from school, I started hanging with him and he was involved in this stuff. He was like this little, he was just into the neo-Nazi skinhead stuff. And every night my cousin he would have his friends come over and they'd always bring beer and they were like 16, 17-year-old guys. I'm 13 going on 14. These guys are totally cool to me. They have tattoos and, girls and, just older and they looked tough. And when these guys would sit around and talk, I could tell you that I knew that they didn't live around black people. You know what I mean? Like I could just tell because the way they talk, they lived around Amish people. There are any black people up there. So when they would talk, I remember my cousin would say to them, yo, you don't know what you're talking about. My little cousin right here, he lives in one of the worst neighborhoods in Philly. And then these neo-Nazi guys would start asking me like, what's it like? Do you really take the train with black people every day? And I'm like, yeah, man, I got to take the L train and I got to take the trolley in the school and we go right through the housing projects. Yeah, I mean, that's life. And what that did to me was when these guys would, when they would ask me these things, look, if I came home to my parents with a black eye or a trophy for sports, my parents never said, how'd you get those things? Are you okay? Is life good? Are you all right? I never heard that from my parents. These guys asking me what's it like around black people was someone saying, yo, how's your day? How's your life? And I loved it. So as I start to hang out with these guys more and more, and then they start talking to me about how everybody's mud races and that, I would hear things like the Jews control everything. But I'll tell you, there was the trick to all this for me at first. And I know a lot of other former white supremacists and people that were in gangs that will tell you the same thing. One night I went out with all these guys before I had completely joined the group. We went to this concert hall. And while we were at this concert hall, the neo-Nazi skinheads were going in there and they were beating everybody up in this little punk rock show. And everyone feared them. Like you seen the look of fear on their face when people would come by us, and I'm standing with all these big bad neo-Nazis, and people fear us. And I love that. Are you kidding me? For the last so many years of my life, I feared everything. I feared my parents and their neglect. I feared my step-parents. I feared my school. I feared if I was going to have enough food to eat. And now someone fears me because I'm with these guys? Bet. It's on. So that night was one of the nights that after we got done at this concert hall, I had still some skater haircut style going. And they said, yo, why don't you shave that off? And I said, all right, let's do it. And so every guy that was there that night took turns with the clippers. Every guy would take the clippers, do one row of my hair. And I was in.
So could you give us a picture of what life was like as a neo-Nazi?
Yeah. So I remember some of the first things I got to go do was go up to these like Bible studies. They would actually have Bible studies to teach us how to be more of what they call Christian identity neo-Nazis. So they taught how to hate through the Bible, through the Christian Bible. And what had happened was one of my first times I ever went there. Now again, I told you, I never got the Jew jokes from my neighbor. I just didn't get them. I didn't understand them. And when I was at my first ever Bible studies meeting, this guy started to talk about what they don't call it that anymore, but it was called ZOG, Z-O-G, the Zionist Occupational Government. And that's basically the deep state, right? And they would say that ZOG is the secret Jewish government that runs the world and runs America. So when these guys would talk about ZOG, I remember this guy saying about how the Jews secretly siphon money off the Federal Reserve and they give it all to Israel. And what that did to me in that moment was it unlocked the joke that I'd heard when I was a kid. Oh, that's why my uncle said that. I get it now. Like, this must be the truth. This is unlocking what the adults know in my life. Wow. Like, okay, like I'm learning the truth right now. So everything I did from that moment on was in support of this movement. I wanted to grow this movement. I wanted to get bigger. I would talk to other men and boys and females too, but to try to recruit people into this. Like, I was always one of those people that was just able to get people into what I was doing. Like, when I was a kid, I would make a hockey team. I get the best hockey team. If I knew little groups, I was just one of those type of people. Like, it's a gift. It's a gift and a curse, and sometimes. But I would go around and I would try to recruit people, and I could tell you how this racism, right, is the biggest bait and switch. See, I would hear someone say, now this is back in the day, this is the late 80s, early 90s. I would hear someone say, man, I just want to be proud to be white. How come they got BET, Black Entertainment Television? How come they got BET, but we don't have white entertainment television? Not knowing, let's be real, that all television is white entertainment television. There's not many black people on Friends, just being real. But I would hear this, and at the time that resonated with me. Like, I could say, yeah, that's what we're all about, man. We're all about being proud to be white. And, and if I say I'm proud to be white, then I'm a racist, right? And you would hear all this stuff. And I'd say, yeah. And at the time I believed this, I say, yeah, that's what our group is all about. Come join our group. So I hear, and when I'm going to tell you, when we get together in these little groups, we never talk about our heritage. We always talk about their heritage and those people. And when they're ruining everything. And it's those. We don't ever say, oh, let's be proud to be white because of this. Or some humanitarian thing. It's always look at what they're doing. And so I would get these people in their false pride and turn it into hate. Again, I don't know that I'm doing that. I think that I'm just building up people to fight for the white race. And I truly believed in that. So there's a bunch of things that went on where in the movement that I came up with. There was a lot of, people robbing banks and people selling stolen guns. And then, and violence was always a part of this movement. But I happened to be a person, for some reason, was always the one that got in front of the cameras. Whenever there was like a new thing going on, the media would come, and I was always like the spokesperson. If the newspapers came around, I was always the one that gave the quotes. I don't know why, it just is the way it is, right? So eventually I got my own TV show in Springfield, Illinois. By this time I'm traveling around the country as a 14, 15, 16, 17. Like I never went to high school. I just lived in the movement and traveled all around the country and lived in safe houses and compounds. And, would get in a bunch of trouble and then they ship me to another compound, or I get in a bunch of trouble and go somewhere else. And eventually I got to Springfield, Illinois, and I started my own TV show called The Reich. And it was about how to recruit people, and it was on cable access. Anyone could watch it. And and that's the type of stuff that I did. And eventually I went to prison.
Well, we'll get to that story. But in the meantime, could you give us the PG version of what neo-Nazis believe about the Bible and the origin of the evil, in quotes, evil Jews?
Sure. The PG version here. So everyone knows the story of Adam and Eve, so we know. And what I was told when I was, now again, just want to remind everyone, I was born and raised Irish Catholic. I went to catechism. I would go to mass on our Catholic high holidays, Christmas and Easter. I was considered an okay Catholic boy. When I started going to these neo-Nazi groups and they would preach out of the Bible, they would say, okay, the first story of Adam and Eve, that the serpent comes to Eve and he doesn't get her to partake of this fruit. He gets to be with her and he impregnates her with Cain. And then Eve runs back to Adam and does it with him so that she can lie to him and say that this child is yours. And that when Cain is born, who later on kills Abel, that Cain is the first evil Jew on this planet, and he's born from the seed of Satan. And if any of your listeners or viewers ever do any research, for whatever reason, you'll hear this saying sometimes that the Jews are the seed of Satan. It goes back to that story. Now, being born and raised Irish Catholic, Father Wassel and Sister Mary Agnes never taught me that story out of the Bible. Never. Like I never heard this before. And again, I would question, like, why does everyone else not know this? And they say, because God chose to let you know it now. This is the truth. And so when you go off of that, and again, everything that we preached, everything they preached, and everything that was talked about was always about how the Jews are trying to destroy the white race. It just backed it up continuously and dehumanized everybody that was anything associated with it.
Do you recall like having arguments with people and explaining to them like how bad the Jews were?
Oh yeah, all the time. Well, I knew this as a weapon quickly in my recruiting days and my, talking to people about these beliefs, is I can be having a great debate talking about crime and how our neighborhoods aren't like that and blah, blah, blah. And then someone would bring up some type of fact, right? That we could kind of put my grinder like, and my quickest defense, and you'll hear this a lot with that's just a Jewish conspiracy. That's a deep state Jewish conspiracy. And, and then at the end, we always got to say, and it's still unfortunately widely used today, is the Jews are just trying to replace us. The Jews will not replace us. It's a very common thing with these groups. And so I could always just defend and go with that and win the argument, because there's no defense to that. How are you going to tell me something's not a conspiracy? You know what I mean? So it was ongoing every day, all the time. That's all we talked about. So
could you describe how you went to prison and why you went to prison?
Yeah. So I went to prison for, in the realm of the white supremacist neo-Nazi world, our arch enemy, like on the streets of this country, is Antifa, the anti-fascist movement. Wherever we pop up, they pop up. They're a reactionary group. Like, you don't ever really hear about Antifa. You never hear about a gang of Antifa extorting people. They only come out when white supremacists or neo-Nazis come out. That's kind of how their program works. And for anyone that doesn't know, I literally fought against these guys for years, and they were my enemy, and I studied my enemy. And eventually I kidnapped one of their guys in the state of Illinois and held him for ransom for a while. And just never got a ransom for it. So that's what happened. We never got a ransom. So we had to let him go. And when we let him go, he obviously went to the police because we had done a lot of damage. We had videotaped the whole thing, tortured him. That's kind of what we did with those guys. And so yeah, I went up 17 years old, and a arrest warrant was put out for my arrest for the kidnapping. And I went to go do the next taping of my TV show, which was at a local community college that had a TV station. And there was all these undercover cops there, and they arrested me for aggravated kidnapping and charged me as an adult. Like, they were done playing with me. I was 17. I was doing big boy crimes, and again, at the same time, we got guys out robbing banks all over the Midwest, and guys plotting murders, and plotting race wars, and I mean, it was just the insanity of it all. And I was so deep into it. And so anyway, I get charged as an adult and was arrested.
We'll be right back this week's episode. I don't know about you, but I used to get overwhelmed going to those mini markets, trying to find the perfect Esrog and Lulav for me. I don't know, it just felt like a chaotic treasure hunt, and I don't know if I really found treasure. My friends still make fun of the Esrogim that I used to find. That's why I am so excited to tell you about EsrogShopper.com. They make the whole process easy and stress-free. They're back for their 8th year. Esrog Shopper has earned the trust of countless customers, including myself, and I can see why. Whether you're looking for that in with an Esrog macher, but don't have the budget or connections, or you simply don't have the time to search for the perfect set, Yeshua and Yaakov Berger have you covered. Esrog Shopper is unique. They let you choose your price point and customize your Esrog to your exact specifications. Want a Chazon Ish Esrog with a pitum on the larger side, yellow in color, and with bumps? No problem. Oh, you prefer something smaller and leave the rest to them? Done. Plus, they offer 100% satisfaction or money back guarantee, and they mean it. Here's the best part. Listeners get 5% off with the promo code INSPIRE. With their exceptional customer service and quality, Esrog Shopper makes getting a beautiful Esrog simple and enjoyable. Visit EsrogShopper.com, use code INSPIRE, and make this Succos truly special. They have the best customer service, the most gorgeous Esrogim, and very well priced. My Esrog would have been probably $900 in the Shuk, and it was a fraction of the price with them. Now, before we get back, you've all seen the news. Bombs are going off in Israel, Tzfas, and so many places, and it's really scary. But what does that have to do with you? You're home, you're in Lakewood or Brooklyn or Muncie or Canada. Let me explain. Whether you run a business, work for a living, or know someone who does, we all understand the struggle. And this past year, Israel has faced unimaginable challenges. With the country rocked by turmoil, we often overlook a crucial question. How are businesses surviving? How are families putting food on the table? I have a friend in Tzfas who hasn't seen a customer in over 8 months. A restaurant owner I know is on the brink of closing down. These are real stories of people who are struggling to make ends meet. Sword to Shekel is stepping in to help. This amazing organization supports these businesses by purchasing gift cards from them and distributing them to soldiers. These brave men and women haven't been able to work as they've been tirelessly defending the nation. So this Rosh Hashanah, let's open our hearts by supporting Sword to Shekel. You're not just helping Israeli businesses survive, you're also giving back to the soldiers who protect us all. Your generosity can make a real difference in the lives of so many. As we enter this new year, feel proud that you've helped support Hashem's children in their time of need. Go to swordtoshekel.org, that's 2 with the number 2, or you can look at the link in the show notes, and open your hearts. $1, $18, $100, $1,000, whatever you can give. You'd be surprised how even a little bit does so much. So please open your hearts and go ahead and please help our friends at Sword to Shekel. Now, before we dive back into this episode, I have a request. Well, 2. First of all, it really helps when you support our advertisers, as you know. And we turn down at least half of the interested advertisers because we want to ensure that you get the right organization or the right business to support. Because, hey, we're putting our name behind it. We want you to believe in it too. Secondly, as you're watching this on YouTube, can you please hit the thumbs up button and leave a short comment about this video? It's our way of seeing you on the other side, and it really makes a big difference. It helps other people see how many people are interacting. We get to see the feedback, and of course, YouTube algorithm gets to see it. Okay, we're getting back into it, and really amazing part with Frank is coming up. Strap in, here we go.
Could you tell us about what kind of prison you went to, and when you went in there,
Was it more difficult than you anticipated, easier than you anticipated?
So when I first got arrested, I went into the county jail, the adult county jail, which is not, this isn't Mayberry. This isn't like this little, this was a huge holding facility for federal inmates, for state inmates, people waiting trial. It was a big one. Anyway, what they did with me, because I was so young and they were afraid of me trying to escape and all that, they put me in a hole, and they put me in segregation, just for my safety, for being the youngest kid in the prison at the time, whatever. And when you're in the hole, now there's a law that you have to let someone out 1 hour a day. They didn't have that law yet. That didn't apply at the time. So I just stayed in my cell all the time, except for like once or twice a week, they would take me out to go shower. And if I needed to use the phone, they would let me out of my cell and let me make a phone call. So I was in there for about 4 months. Yeah. And, that's where a lot of people that are not mentally well are in there. And there's people that scream and holler and do horrible things in their cell with their bodily fluids, and they clog up the toilets and they flood all the other cells out all the time. And I remember I was in there and I started to talk to myself. That's what happens when you're solitary confinement long enough. Just you start to talk just to hear yourself, to hear something else other than what's in your head. And that happens a lot to people. And that's why there's been a big movement of people saying we need to look at solitary confinement. That happened to me. But I remember they would come around with like religious books, once a week, once every other week. And I remember I grabbed the Christian Bible, and I was reading, and there's always this funny joke they always say, where do you find God at? You find him in the county jail. That's where everyone else finds him, right? Because people are like, I need to get out of trouble. Please help me, Anyway, I was reading, and there was this part in there and where it talks about fasting. It says that if you fast, that God will reveal himself to you. So I'm like, all right, bet. So I picked a weekend. I said, all right, I'm going to fast from Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I'm just going to fast. And it says in there, you cannot brag or boast, because bragging or boasting, you already got your reward. People just know you're fasting, and I get to run around and talk about how cool I am with God. So you can't brag or boast that you're fasting. So they start trying to feed me, and I keep pushing the food back out. I'm like, I don't want it. And they're asking me, are you refusing to eat? And I just say, yeah, I'm refusing to eat. And why? I'm just am. Now I got to tell you, at the time, I'm insane. I'm praying for Hashem or for God at the time. I'm saying, please, I want you, if I fast, I want you to kill all the guards on Sunday, and I want you to pop the door and let me go home. That's where I am in my head. I'm like, that's what I want you to do. I want you to kill all the guards. If you're real, you'll do this for me. And so the whole weekend, I'm not eating. And then Sunday, the guy who runs the county jail, who they call him the warden, but he was a lieutenant of the sheriff's department. He pulls me out. Now I got to remind you, my case is a big case. It's on the news all the time. I had the TV show, the neo-Nazi, the kidnapping, the whole thing. It's like on the news. So it's a big deal. So I say. But the warden comes in and he says, pulls me out of my cell on Sunday, because it's now my third day of not eating. And he says, are you on a hunger strike? And I'm like, no. He says, well, why are you not eating? I said, can't tell you, but you might want to be prepared. You might want to say goodbyes tonight, because some stuff's going down tomorrow, right? So I'm that insane. And, but I just said, I can't, I'm just not eating. I can't say anything else about it. And he says, if you're not trying to hurt yourself, he says, how about this, Mr. Meeink? If you eat tomorrow, Monday, which I'd already planned on eating on Monday, so I'm just playing this off when he goes, if you eat tomorrow, I'll put you in general population. I don't think you belong in the cell block. I think you'll be okay. And I remember just saying, okay, for you. I was like, for you, warden? Absolutely, I'll eat. Next day I eat, and he comes to me and he says, get all your stuff, let's go. And this moment is something that's stuck with me forever. It's one of those moments that just with you, is they brought me out with all my stuff, and I was looking, and they were waiting to transfer me, and I'm just staring at this brick wall. And as I'm looking at this brick wall, like this feeling and this sense that came over me, and it said, I'm not going to give you what you want because you're insane, but I'll give you what you need. And I'm going to get you out of the cell block where you've been talking to yourself. That's what I'll do for you. And I was like, okay. And I went to go in that new cell block. And as soon as I got in there, funny enough, in the county jail, people don't really gang up too much or affiliate with too much stuff because we're all on trial, so we're all trying to be good boys in there. And well, I'm not part of anything, everyone's doing that. And so when I got up in there, everyone knew who I was because I was on the news all the time, and they have TVs in their day room. So everyone was like, oh, that's that neo-Nazi. So I just got in there, and there was a bunch of younger black kids that were waiting to do time and stuff. And as we started talking, I just remember a couple of them said, hey, do you know how to play cards? Do you know how to play spades? I said, I didn't know how to play this card game spades. So I started playing with these guys, and they were teaching me how to cheat and how to play. And we just kind of became friends until all of our trials came up. So my trial came up, and there was also a group of guys that were all born again Christians who used to always invite me into their little Bible study sometimes. And those guys were pretty cool. And so anyway, I wound up getting 3 to 5 years on my sentence. And I get sent upstate. Well, 3 years was my sentence, my actual sentence. I get sentenced at 3 years. I get sent upstate prison. And my first prison I get sent to is with this man named John Wayne Gacy. I don't know if you've heard of him, or if anyone, he's the guy who dressed up like a clown and killed 34 young men and buried them all under his house in Chicago. He's one of the most famous serial killers ever. He's in the prison I'm in, and I'm 17. The same age group that this guy was killing people. But I wasn't scared of him. I just want to let people know that, and it's not because I'm some super tough guy. I'm kind of a smaller guy, but I had already gotten letters in the county jail from the Aryan gangs, knowing that I got sentenced and I was coming up, and they're like, "Hey, we got your back. Don't worry about nothing." Again, I'm like the little TV star. So when I got upstate, I was waiting to meet up with all my Aryan guys and all my Aryan gangs, and that was, so I didn't worry about the things that a lot of people are like, "Oh my gosh, this is going to happen to me. This bad thing's going to." I really was I'm cool, I just had to get up there, and so I got up there and got put in with a lot of my Aryans, and was on cell blocks that had a lot of Aryans, and we were still way outnumbered, but we had each other's backs, and so.
So I'd love to get to that connection because we're deep in your story, and you're still you're in jail. Clearly, at this point, you still hate Jews. You're still officially a neo-Nazi. When did that transition start? Did it start from after you got out of prison?
So the first things that I started to notice when I was up in the penitentiary was, for one, all my Aryans, the guys that were in my gang, my clique, were mostly bikers and just big white rednecky guys from Southern Illinois, and were in the Harley Davidson and all that. I'd never really been on a bike in my life. I don't know anything about bikes, so be it. And so I was this young athletic kid who just wanted to run it. In the county jail, you never got to get out of your cells except for I just didn't get to go out and do anything. Well, upstate prison, you get to go to yard. And so sometimes I played some sports with the Aryans, but they weren't as good. I think they would openly admit that. They could fix your transmission at 2 years old, but they don't know how to cradle a football or dribble a basketball. It's just not their thing. And so some of the younger black kids I was up in the county jail with, they came up in the state prison. And so I just knew them guys. And so we had played basketball sometimes in our county jail. We had a little basketball court sometimes. So they knew I knew how to ball a little bit. And so they were always like, "Oh, you should come play with us." And my Aryans, again, I'm a higher ranking person because I have all the literature. I know reasons why to hate. A lot of bikers are just not knocking them, just being truthful. They're kind of just Neanderthal guys, just "Oh, I hate everybody," you know what I mean? And just I can sit there and explain to you why I hate, and I can explain to you different groups. So anyway, when I started playing with some of the black kids, my Aryans it wasn't American History X where "Why are you doing that?" They knew I was good and were always "Oh, I'm the white boy showing people up." And I just really enjoyed playing with a lot of those guys. And on top of that, this is America. And the truth is that I kidnapped a guy and I got 3 years. There were black kids in there that were my age who got 17, 18 years for selling crack or being drug dealers. I noticed that. I was like, yo, this system's not set up. I don't have the silver spoon in my mouth, but I definitely got a little bit easier if I was black. I definitely would have did more time, and that's a fact. And so I was kind of looking at that, going, So I get out of prison. I still am a neo-Nazi. I mean, to the day I left, still shaved my head, still was involved in all of our meetings, still did everything with my Aryan gang. Just sometimes hung out and played basketball with some of the kids and played cards and dominoes with some of the black kids on our cell block sometimes, more often than other people would, just because I was cool or had a better time sometimes with those guys. Anyway, when I get home from prison, I want to still be a neo-Nazi. This is my biggest thing in life. This is where I identify. This is where I get all my clout and all my pull and all that. Like, this is everything for me. I come home it sounds egotistical, but I'm just trying to set it for you the right way, like almost in a heroish way. Like, I kidnapped an Antifa member, our rival, like, and I did my time. So I come home and I'm got this ego about me. And, but I knew that when I would hear other neo-Nazis say things about black people or, all black people are this way, I would, in the corner of my mind, I go, nah, that's not true. I wasn't saying it out loud at neo-Nazi rallies going, oh, let me explain to you guys, well, that's not all fully, come on. But I in the back of my mind, I'm going, that sounds dumb. That's not real. But to keep me part of the movement, to keep me to have this thing, I could still preach against the Jews, right? Because I'm like, I know this literature. I can go with this. And so anytime I get to be around and people are talking other things, I say, oh, well, what about the Jews? Boom, perfect. Still in. So Hashem just had different plans because I'm looking for work. And as we didn't get to talk about, when I was about 15, I had a big swastika tattooed on my neck and had neo-Nazi tattoos everywhere. So when I go get a job and have skinhead written on my knuckles and have aggravated kidnapping on my record, these ain't good people skills, right? Nobody's, what are you going to say? Oh, he has a swastika on his neck. That must be management. Oh, let's put him in management. He's got a swastika on his neck. You know what I mean? Nobody's hiring me. So a buddy of mine says he can get me a job working at this antique road show in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. And I needed work, I needed money. And I said, I'll take the job. And my buddy goes, well, I got to tell you, my boss he's a Jew. He's a Jew. And I show up I said, you know what? I don't care. And I said, well, does this guy care that I'm a neo-Nazi? My buddy's kind of a neo-Nazi. I said, does he care? And he said, no, his name is Keith Brookstein. He said, no, Keith said he doesn't care what you believe, just don't break his furniture. And I just showed up and I worked for this man for a weekend. And when I got done working for him, I thought he was going to Jew me. I thought he wasn't going to pay me all my money because I had made tons of money in tips for the weekend, way more money than I was supposed to get paid by him. I made double that in tips. So I figured he's going to say, you got your money. I told you that. And now Keith was one of these, he wasn't religious, but he would do things that were very stereotypical. Like you go, oh, oy vey, what do you do to my furniture? Just little stereotypical things that would make me laugh, but also be like, he's Jewish. So he wound up paying me all my money. Knew I made all that and just was like, here you go. And he said, how much do I owe you? And I said, you owe me $300. And he counted out the 300 and he says, you know what? Here's an extra 100. You're a really good worker. Thanks. And I remember, I wanted to fight with him that day. I remember because I was waiting for him to say he's not going to pay me and I have this whole resentment already set in the back of my mind. When he did that, I kind of was like, damn, man, you ruined it, So he gives me a ride back into Philly from Cherry Hill that night. And then he said, hey, man, what do you do for a living? I pointed to the swastika. I'm driving in a truck where my swastika is looking right at him as he's the driver of the big truck. And he said, what do you do for a living? And I said, man, I don't do anything, man. So why don't you come work for me? And I went and I worked for this man. And he was just one of the best men you could ever meet. And I'll tell you, there was things where we would drive in a truck, and I could tell you when this was. This was in 1994 because it was the O.J. Simpson trial just started kind of going on, and this thing with O.J. And so they would talk about DNA, and we were always listening to news radio or we reading the newspapers or driving, and we just talk about DNA and life and all the little things about life and just in a truck with this man. That was kind of my job. There was a couple other, he had tons of other little employees, but my job was to go with him on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays to go pick up furniture in North Jersey, out in Pennsylvania, down in wherever. Like we just went and picked up furniture all over the place and go take it to get refinished and put into the storefronts. And so I would just drive with him and we would just talk. And when we would talk, I remember there'd be times where, right, I could be this big bad neo-Nazi all I want, but obviously there's something wrong. I would say things like, oh, I'm so stupid. You know, if I made a mistake or if I didn't know something, I'd be like, I don't know, I'm so stupid, you know. And Keith used to always go, you ain't stupid, man. You're not stupid. And I remember as this one time I broke something. I said, yo, I'm so stupid, Keith. And he looked at me in this funny little way and he kind of grabbed me and said, stop saying you're stupid, you idiot. And as we started to drive that day, he said, you know, Frank, I'm really sick of you saying that. He's like, you always, and he's a very animated guy. He's like, I'm so sick of it. You say that. Why would you say that? He's like, you're one of the smartest men. And he looked at me and said something that still to this day clicks with me whenever I have these feelings. Because I still have these feelings sometimes. He said, Frank, smart people can fake being dumb, but dumb people can't fake being smart. You just are. Get over it. And I just remember, man, he let me out of that truck that day. I'm fully shaved, swastika, neo-Nazi boots. And I'm just looking at this man like, thank you for him. Like, this dude's amazing. And I remember I walked home. He dropped me off by Center City, Philly, and I had to walk into South Philly or going to take the bus, but I wound up just walking. At the time, I was an alcoholic still drinking, so I probably got a 40 ounce and was walking home. And I just remember just thinking about it. Like, yo, I'm wrong. Like this whole, like I've been making exceptions, and you hear this so much in America today. I hate all black people except for this guy, blah, 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 blah. Or I hate all Mexicans except for Juan and John. I know those guys, they're cool. Like the ones I know are okay, but the ones I don't know, they fit my stereotype in my head. And I just got so tired of being that guy. They're all that way except for Keith. So I remember just walking home and contemplating with myself like, dude, we're done. Like, you're done. If you continue to believe the stuff you're believing in something that's evil. You know, whenever I do a lot of public speaking, I take it out of the Talmud where it says you should always start out with a joke. That's what it says in there. So I always try to start out with a joke. And I always say my joke is that at one time I believed because of the color of my skin, I was better than another human being on this planet. Racism is a joke. And who am I to go around and judge the world? So that day was the day where I was like, I'm done. And I just admitted I was done. I started to not identify. If people said, oh, that's Frank, the neo-Nazi, I was like, yeah, no more, man. I'm just done, you know? And I just avoided them at all costs. If they were going to be somewhere, I didn't go. If I already had made plans to go to a certain concert and they were going to be there in force, I just didn't want to be around them. You know, I just didn't want to hear it anymore. I was constantly battling it in my head. And some people have this, it doesn't have to be a neo-Nazi, but we have these little racist tendencies sometimes. People have them. Like where I would drive and an Asian person would cut me off. And I'd say, well, you know the stereotype, eh? And then I go, wait a minute, my aunt ran over a cow this year. Like, and she's white and she hit a cow, not a deer. I could see if it was a deer. The deer's jumping away. Cows were already there and it's established their position and she still hit the cow, right? Okay. A black guy would be selling food stamps. And I would say, oh, see, that's what, and I go, wait a minute, my mom sells her food stamps. My mom's always sold her food stamps for extra money. Now I'm going to judge this man? Like, who am I? Who am I? So I got out of it and stayed out of it until the Oklahoma City bombing. When the Oklahoma City bombing went down, for any of you that don't know, that was definitely tied back to our movement. And that was the day I went to the FBI. And I said, hey, I'd like to tell you guys my story and what I know. Now, I don't know Timothy McVeigh, but I know Timothy McVeigh's. I wanted to be a Timothy McVeigh. That's what people don't get. When I talk about how radicalized I was, I would have walked into the room of some of our movement at times, and if they would have said, yo, Frank, we got the keys for a U-Haul truck right now, we need to take into a federal building, I would have said, I'm down. I'm down. And now I see it in action. And I see all those dead children. So I went to the FBI and I said, hey, and here's who I am. They knew who I was. They had checked me out and they interviewed me for like a week, seeing that I was not doing anything other than like relieving myself of this mess that I had gotten myself into in life. And so they pushed me over to the Anti-Defamation League. And as a neo-Nazi, we hate the ADL. I mean, we literally hate the ADL. And here they're like, you want me to go meet with the ADL? So I met with the ADL. And right away I met a beautiful man in there his name is Barry Morrison. It still is, he's still alive. His name's Barry Morrison. And I met this man and he just kind of took me under his wing a little bit and seen something in me and asked me to start speaking at schools and doing, speaking engagements. And that's all great. And I love doing speaking engagements. I'm pretty funny and, I can relate to people and pretty good at a crowd type thing. But I didn't want to just be that guy. So I went to the ADL and the Philadelphia Flyers and said, hey, look, when I was in prison, we played sports and we put all this stuff to the side. I was like, I'd like to do that with hockey. And only a year and a half out of prison, I got a job working with the Philadelphia Flyers, trying to get more black kids to play the game. Just amazing. So I did that for a while. And then I started this, I wrote a book and I got invited to go speak in Ireland for Google with about 100 other former neo-Nazi, former jihadists, former you name it, former gang members. And then we started Life After Hate from there, which was a movement, a group of us. I had already been doing interventions on neo-Nazis at the time and doing like exit plans to get them out. And now we made and there was other guys that started to come on board and they all started doing it with us. And so we made this group called Life After Hate and I did that for years. And yeah.
The climax of the episode is coming up, but first, innovation thrives on technology. Take Amazon, for example. It started as a simple online bookstore, but transformed into one of the largest companies in the world through the power of technology and advanced software. From selling books to delivering everything from groceries to medicine, Amazon redefined what's possible in business. So, for business owners, this is the blueprint for success, leveraging technology to turn a simple idea into something extraordinary, or as many people say, extraordinary. And that's where BitBean comes in. BitBean software solutions empower you to mold your business in ways you never thought possible. Whether you're looking to streamline operations, enhance customer experience, or break into new markets, BitBean helps you harness the full potential of technology. Imagine a nursing home using custom software to automate scheduling, track patient care, and improve the communication with families, all while ensuring compliance and reducing errors. Or a real estate company using a tailored platform to manage properties, handle tenant requests, and analyze market trends in real time. These aren't just ideas, they're innovations that can transform your business. So my friends, just as Amazon used the right tools to dominate the market, you can too. With BitBean, your business can be more than successful, it can be revolutionary. Visit bitbean.com to see how your vision can become a reality. Innovate, grow, and lead with BitBean by your side. Now, one of the biggest frustrations guys have with clothing, especially suits, is finding the perfect balance between style and comfort. No one wants to feel stiff and restricted in a suit that looks great but is impossible to move in. Enter Twillory, the brand that's redefining what it means to wear a suit. Twillory suits are designed to eliminate those annoyances we all know too well. Made with breathable, stretchy fabric, their suits move with you, not against you. So you can go from davening to kiddush without feeling like you're wrapped in a straitjacket. And Twillory's Air Suit is the ultimate game changer. It's wrinkle resistant, lightweight, and even machine washable, making it perfect for shul and beyond. Imagine a suit that keeps you looking sharp through chakras, doesn't make you overheat during the rabbi's drasha, and still feels comfortable enough to wear all day. That's the Twillory difference. And let's be real, who doesn't want to look great at shul without sacrificing comfort? With Twillory, you get the best of both worlds, suits that are stylish, comfortable, and built for the real life. Try it once and you'll see why it's become my go-to for looking good and feeling great. Use promo INSPIRE for $18 off your first order today at Twillory.com. Of course, go support Twillory. We love them and you will too. Could you tell us about your struggles with, after you got out and drug addiction and where that took your life?
Yeah. So my alcoholism, um, I belong to every 12-step program that's ever been invented. I belong in it. Okay,
Okay.
that's my life. No, yeah, my alcoholism. See, when I was a neo-Nazi, we weren't allowed to do drugs. There was no drugs allowed in our neo-Nazi movement. If you did drugs, we kill you, we get rid of you. However, we didn't want drug addicts part of our group because drug addicts are always the first people to snitch. They just are. It's a fact. And we were doing so much criminal stuff at the time that we were like, we don't want anyone like that doing, you know. So alcoholism, which has been born and bred in me from where I grew up. I mean, I always drank. I grew up drinking in an Irish Catholic neighborhood. Then my dad had a bar. I mean, I just always grew up drinking. And so I was full-fledged alcoholic all throughout my neo-Nazi years. I don't bring that up while I'm telling you that, like to tell you, because I don't want people to think, oh, he's trying to find an excuse. But it's just an explanation of the truth of who I was. I was always a drinker. I was always a person that kept parties going. And when I got out of the neo-Nazis, now I was allowed to do drugs. It was like this little freedom, you know. I was 19 years old and gotten out, and I was like, oh wait, now I can do this and do that. Okay. And so then that addiction kicked in, and just like everyone had, there's a huge part of this country that started this way. I mean, because drugs is unfortunately a major part of our story here in America. But I went from the Vicodin and the Percocets and the opioids to the higher ones, which at the time was Oxycontin. And then I went into heroin. And there's so many people in this country that have that same exact story. They started with the pills and the oxys, and then they went on to the heavier stuff. And so I was one of those people. I went right down in there. So yeah, I started trying to get sober in 1998. Was my first real touch of, hey, I need to do something about this because it's out of control in my life, and it was. I can speak for myself as being someone in recovery, is that in my head back when I'm in my using phase and the addiction is awake and alive in me, I either feel like the greatest or the greatest piece of garbage. It's constant. And to keep my brain from ever feeling like, yo, you're a piece of garbage, I would drink and use to change the channel. And I constantly did that. And I don't know that at the time. When you're a drug addict, alcoholic, it's not like, oh, I know I need to change. It's just what happens with us. So I started trying to get sober in 1998. I'm running Harmony through hockey, which is going great. And a few years later, we started like Life After Hate, and I'm doing interventions. And I would get 2-3 years sober here and there and do great things. And this is a very common story with alcoholic drug addicts. We get a little bit of sober time and we build up big, great futures. And then I would burn that down in front of everyone again and again and again. So really struggled really hard. I was in and out of the rooms, the 12-step program rooms, in and out, not getting it. Like, just couldn't really get it. So about 2014, now I've been through a lot in my life, but now I'm married, I'm a hockey coach, I'm winning national championships, I'm doing ESPN radio, I'm working for professional hockey teams, things you would think are great. Now, things are going great for me. Working in radio and political talk radio in Iowa. I moved to Iowa and I'm living in a farmhouse, and I got things that a ghetto kid from Philly doesn't get to do, and I'm doing it. And then touch and go with my sobriety, but then finally 2014, the worst 5 years of my life started. Even though all this good stuff was behind it, and I'm still doing it. The Harmony through hockey, the hockey coaching, the doing the interventions. My oldest son dies, and I'm not giving an excuse for my behavior. I'm just laying it out there. My oldest son dies in a car accident. My mom dies of a fentanyl overdose. The best man at my wedding, my cousin, one of my closest cousins, not the cousin that got me into the neo-Nazis, just another very close cousin, he kills himself. Then his older brother, my older cousin, kills himself. My marriage falls apart. And in the midst of all of that, about 2014, I started filming this documentary about religion in Iowa. I was living in Iowa. It's not a very diverse place, but it's kind of diverse spiritually in a way. It really is. It's a funny place, Iowa. in Iowa, a lot of people don't know this, the longest, oldest standing mosque in all of North America is in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. It's called Mother Mosque Number 1. Who would thought it was in Iowa, but it is. And then there's the Maharishi University where people go learn how to meditate. And there's a town at this Fairfield, Iowa, where thousands and thousands of people, 20,000 people come and live in that town that are not from Iowa to learn how to meditate. And they usually pick up roots and plant roots there, and they live there now. People from Berkeley and New York. And anyway, it's a crazy place. And while I was there doing all this work, I knew this Chabad rabbi who lived not far from my house in Iowa, like literally 6 blocks from my house. He had a restaurant. He had read my book. He knew my book, and he knew of me. So we were kind of friends, and I would stop by. And he had a deli called Maccabee's Deli, and he had this sandwich called the Whole Megillah, and I would go there every week and just kill it. And so we just became friends. And when I asked him to take part in the documentary, he said to me, "Are you going to do a documentary about how you're Jewish?" And I was like, "I'm not Jewish." And he says, "Well, you should look into your last name." And this is what started the conversation. My last name is my mom's maiden name, which is a funny thing, but it's not Jewish. It's actually like Dutch or something. But he says, "You should look into that." So I put out on social media in 2004 to put it out, and I said, "Hey, this rabbi, I'm doing this documentary and writing a little story about it on social media." And said, "This rabbi saying that Meeink, my last name, is Jewish." Funny. My uncle chimes in on the post and says, "I told you this already." And now I remember when I first became a neo-Nazi, my uncle took me out to lunch to try to talk me out of all this. And in the midst of him, we talked about a lot of stuff. But one of the small things he said was, he goes, "We're Jewish, right?" And I never believed him, so it never stuck in my head that was true, because he just was one of those uncles that would just bust your chops, He goes, "We were first Jewish, right?" Oh, my uncle writes and says, "I told you this years ago." And a couple of my aunts and all started jumping in on this line, and they're all like, "Yeah, grandmom's grandmom was Jewish. Your mom's mom, your mom's great-great-grandmom." So I'm like, wow, okay. So now I believe. I'm like, okay, these are all aunts. They're all pretty legit. And that was right before these really bad times started happening in my life. So I had really struggled with the religion that I was raised with. Really struggled with it. There was just things that weren't clicking for me. I'm sure they clicked well for billions and millions of others. There was just things that weren't clicking for me, right? So I was like, I'm going to look into this. But now this 5-year span of this horrible part of my life happens. And I'm getting this nasty divorce and War of the Roses divorce. It was horrendous. And in the time, and I just have to say this, in that time, I started talking to this woman during my divorce and was like, "Hey, I was like, "Yeah, I'm Jewish." And she's like, "I'm Jewish." Now, there's not many in Iowa, in Des Moines, Iowa, but here I happen to find one, and we started dating through my divorce. Just we're friends, and we're really good friends, and we started dating. And I left her house one day, and that day I had gotten some paperwork from my divorce, which was not good, and just gut-wrenching stuff was going on in my life. And I'm driving, and I had to stop driving because I just was crying so much in the car, and I had that. I'm sure we all had, where I wanted to cry so bad that it was stuck in my throat, and I just wanted to scream and get it out. I was like, and people say it was a panic attack. I don't think it was a panic attack. There was this something going on with me. So I was like, let me pull over, because I'm constantly wiping tears out of my eyes. I'm driving, and I pulled over the side of the road, and this is my story. It doesn't matter what you believe or what. Anyway, I just know what happened. So I pulled over to the side of the road, and again, I'm relapsing. So I'm not right, but I pulled over the side of the road and I said, "Please kill me," talking to whoever up there. I'm like, "Please just kill me. Please let a Mack truck hit me today. I'm not going to kill myself, because I know that killing myself only passes the pain on to my children, who I love my children. And this divorce is so horrible." And I was like, "I'm not going to kill myself, but please just let a Mack truck hit me. Or please let a telephone pole fall on me right now. I'm just done. I'm done." And as I'm screaming this up, my phone rings, and I pick it up, and it's the girl I was dating. And as I pick up, she's screaming, crying on the phone. And I'm like, what? And she says, get back to my house. My sister just killed herself. I need you here. And this shook me to my core. And so I hung up, as I was hanging up the phone, and this is, again, my story. As I hung up the phone, this voice came into my car with me and just said, get to California. I have work for you. That's all this voice said. And I just said, okay. That happened. I said, okay. There was a man that I had met in 2011. I was going to the rooms of recovery at the time. And I was in LA. I was doing a TV show about me doing interventions on neo-Nazis. It was the first ever televised, recorded episode ever of a real intervention done on a neo-Nazi. And so I was doing this for AMC, which they later on we just shot a couple pilots and stuff for it. But anyway, while I was here in Los Angeles, this older gentleman came over to me one time at this gathering of recovery people. He just came over to me and he said, someone introduced us to each other, and he said, a fellow Heb at a meeting. And I was like, I'm not Jewish. I'm actually a former neo-Nazi. I'm in town working on a TV, I'm doing a TV show right now about being a neo-Nazi. And he just looked at me and goes, well, you look like a Heb to me. And he's this little old Jewish dude, like. And I said, okay. And for whatever reason, that summer that I was here working on the television show, we swapped phone numbers. And I used to call him sporadically. My TV show never made it to air, and I moved back to Iowa, and been years. And just every once in a while, I used to call this man. Don't know why. Just remember we had good conversations when I lived here that summer about recovery. And I used to call him every once in a while, and he used to always say to me, Frank, you have this disease, meaning of alcoholism. You have this disease really bad, but you have some gifts in you, and I can help men like you. And that's all he used to say to me, like at the end of our conversations. And so when that voice said, get to California, I knew to call this old Jewish man. And I called him, and I said, after I helped my friend, my girlfriend, who's my friend now at the time, through her troubles with her family, I decided to move to Los Angeles and let him become what we would call my recovering rabbi. I mean, he teaches me, he has taught me, and still to this day continues to teach me every day about how to connect with a higher power. But he uses more of the 12 steps and the 12 world concepts and all the tools of recovery. And so anyway, I came out here so that man would do that with me. So when I got here, I wanted to start trying to, as a great rabbi friend said to me, you don't need to convert. You just need to transfer over because you're already good. Your mom, your grandmom. I looked up my family tree. I found out my grandmom, Elizabeth Zellman, and I found stories about her and was like, wow, this is all really true. I did a DNA test and it was like, it's real. It's really there. So then I started to follow what I do today, just to get to the point of some of this is, today I've learned that if I don't fit Judaism and recovery into my life, I fit my life around Judaism and recovery. And the life that I've been given in the last 5 years, been the greatest life could ever ask for. Just being of service to others. Stop thinking about myself all the time. That's one of the problems. And now, again, I didn't walk around knowingly always think about myself. Part of the way the disease hides in us of alcoholism and addiction. And sometimes just people are just that way. I didn't mean for it to be that way. And I got to look at that and work on it and deal with it. And deal with it every day on a daily basis. So one day at a time.
Could you tell us about your, I guess, connection to Judaism now, tefillin, davening, all of it?
So I've had some amazing rabbis in my life now who have helped me learn, who eased me into some things. I could tell you like my first Passover Seder was with a Chabad rabbi, and it was like, maybe I'm blowing this out of proportion, but I remember it was like 6 hours long. And I was like so hungry. I don't know, for whatever reason, I didn't eat before I got there. And I remember I was so hungry, and I was like, You're just giving me chicken right now? Like, are you kidding me? But it was my first introduction into things. And I was like, okay. But how things started to grow in me was, now I said that Hashem, who I can't say it was Hashem that was in my car with me. I don't know who talked to me that day. I will never, whatever. But the last point was that I have work for you. When I moved to Los Angeles and started to really work this thing in my life, funny enough, the government calls and they say, hey, we heard that you know of some neo-Nazis and white supremacists that got into American policing. Do you know any? And I was like, oh, absolutely. And now this is the first time the government's ever called and asked me to do this. They said, we'd like for you to come testify at a hearing about this. So, and I'm going to tell you this story for a reason, because this is right when I'm just starting to get things together and I'm just moving to LA. And I said, sure, I'll do that for you. So I go and I testify and told names and people and places and rankings and what departments these people got into, and that this is real, that not that all cops are this way, but there are white supremacists that got into the policing to do more harm and damage to other people. Just a fact. So I went and I testified, and then as soon as I testified, I started getting a lot of death threats. So I moved to a boat. Like, it's the best ways. If you ever need to hide out, if anyone's listening in your listeners, and you ever need to hide out, you go hide out on a boat. Because if anyone knows where you are, you just untie the boat and go somewhere else. And that's what you do. And then you don't have an address, you're cool. So during the midst of the pandemic, it was the beginning part of the pandemic, or, had been around maybe 6 months, I moved to a boat. And I live on this boat. And when I got there, I just knew that I wanted to immerse myself in this, in Judaism, and learn. And, I had kind of little cheating notes where I would listen to a lot of YouTube, and I would listen to like Rabbi Friedman and Rabbi YY, and there's a whole little list of rabbis that I would just listen to, and I would take these walks and I would read and I would study Torah, and I wrote living on the boat. I found any of the closest temples or synagogues to me, and I wrote every one of them and said, hey, I'm living here. I want to get more involved. I want to learn more about this. And one of the rabbis wrote me back and said, okay, it's the middle of the pandemic. You can come be part of our Torah studies, and you can also be part of our services and anything else. But we're doing everything by Zoom right now because of the height of the pandemic. So she's like, you could do these things with us. And I said, okay. And so for about 2 years, I just studied going to different Torah studies. I would go there, and a couple other groups I would find and do some Torah studies on Zoom, again, all during. So no one knows who I am. Like they don't see my tattoos, you know what I mean? I'm just on a Zoom room and like taking part and learning and studying and just really, really immerse myself into it. And then I started saying, okay, if I'm going to do this, then I'm definitely I learned some stories about reasons why, what stuck with me. And you do your own thing, but one of the things that stuck with me about eating kosher, by staying kosher, there's all different. One of the things I had heard was, just to give you an example, was that the other old tribes used to like hack a leg off of a lamb. And then there was no refrigeration back then, a long time ago. So they would burn and cauterize the wound. But then they would drag this poor lamb for 20 more miles. And that the tribe was going, you don't do that. That's one of God's creatures. You kill it kosher quickly, put it out, And I thought, wow, like we're like the first animal rights activist. Like, I love that. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to stay kosher just to honor the first animal rights activists. And then I started to see things like my old heritage, not my old heritage, I'm still Irish. I still have Irish in me. And I remember hearing about corned beef and cabbage. And it was like, oh, that's such an Irish thing. And it's like, no, it's not. It's a Jewish thing that when the Irish were immigrating here and they were starving, the Jewish butchers and all that were feeding it to them because it was the cheapest thing to kind of feed the masses. And I was like, wow, I never heard that. And to find out it's true. Like, so when Irish people on St. Patrick's Day eat corned beef and cabbage, and the cool thing about Judaism is you have to stay humble. Like, we don't scream every St. Patrick's Day, yo, we fed you that. We helped you when you got here so you didn't starve to death. We don't. We just say, oh, enjoy your corned beef and cabbage, And And so I started just learning little things like that. But the truth that I got to learn was, if I really wanted to learn, I don't call Judaism a religion. It's just my own thing. I just call it a path. It's my path to a one true loving God. Is that if I'm truly going to follow this path, humbleness and humility is the first thing I got to get down. That every story to me is, how's he trying to humble me in the story? How's he trying to teach me some humility in the story? And it seems like the story always works for me. Some of the other things, when I got to work with some other rabbis, one of the Chabad rabbis, who's a blessing in my life, said to me one time, he was bringing me to a naming ceremony. And he said, come on, you're welcome to come. And I got up, and it was just me and him sitting there talking. And I said, sometimes I feel out of place. I didn't do any of this stuff growing up. I didn't do mitzvahs growing up. I'm just learning this. And I said, and I feel people are going to look at me. And he says, you feel judged? Kinda. He says, if you ever feel judged again by someone, you tell them to go judge Moses, because he wasn't raised Jewish neither. You're okay. And I was like, okay. And then I brought all my prayers and my davening and all my tefillin one time up to my friends down in San Diego, one of my rabbi friends down there. And I said, yo, am I doing this right? Am I reading this right? Am I doing this the right way? And he looked at me finally and goes, Frank, even if so, maybe you're not doing it right, but you're never doing it wrong. Just keep doing it, and you'll keep that connection open. It's all about just building that connection. And then when I'm studying the Shema, and I'm hearing the part where it just says to listen, and then the part where I get to go, love the Lord your God. The your part is really important. Like, it's my relationship. It's my relationship to build. It's my way of having an open relationship to, Hashem, to be like, how do you want me to be of service to you? And if I do that, he'll make things happy for me. He'll make things okay. I don't have to have $1 million. I don't have to, be any of these things. Am I happy in my service today and where I come from and what I'm doing? Something I want your listeners and your viewers to take from this, and please don't take this political. One of the biggest things that my servitude towards Hashem is to remind people that in this country, in our country, in America, we have mass incarceration of the poor, of women. We have like 23, no, it's higher than that. It's like 29% of the world's women's prison population, even though we're only 5% of the world's population. We're only 5% of the world's population, but we have it's close to 30% actually. 30% of the world's women's prison population. That's not who we're supposed to be. And one of the other things that I got to learn is that here in America, we have almost 30% of the world's women's prison population, even though we're only 5% of the world population in general. Like, that's not what this place is supposed to be founded on. This is our founding fathers, who I'm a big fan of. Ben Franklin is like one of my major heroes and idols in this world. If they came back right now and said, how's this country doing? And all the political stuff, you put all that stuff to the side, and we got to be honest and say, oh, by the way, we have mass incarceration, and especially of our women. They would be horrified that that's what we're doing, because that's what they were very much against. That's why they gave us the Bill of Rights. And our Bill of Rights is tread on a lot. Yeah. And that's why I'm not here to preach anti-police or anything. We just need some concrete police reform, especially in traffic stops, which has become a business and a way of things that have really gone wrong in this country. And we need to relook at it. And we need to look at the war on drugs. And so that's kind of one of my jobs, is to continue to do that. Also today in my life, I get to work in recovery. I work at trying to get some of our unhoused population housed, and then also find what best recovery programs will fit in their life and help guide them to those things. Because we, in America, in 1935, well, 1933, we stopped prohibition. It was a very big deal in this country. It was 1933. That's when we ended prohibition and people were allowed to drink again. Only 2 years later was this movement called Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, I'm just speaking for historical facts here. Just 2 years after prohibition, this movement starts because people were allowed to go get help and it wasn't criminalized and it wasn't illegal. We did that here. And that movement, that is now all around the world in 90 years. It's all around the world. It's free. It's in many different languages. It's in every religion. There's an Islamic one. There's all different groups that have come up and started to use the 12 steps, which we found it here, and it's free because we get to do things like that. And just so people know that, we're merging here as one tribe. It just is the truth. You know what I mean? Like, we are starting that. For a lot of the time when I was a neo-Nazi, I envisioned, my fears were that someday the white race would be here and then the black race and the other races would catch up and then destroy the white race. That's not what's going to happen. The fastest growing race in America is the mixed race person. We're going to keep mixing and molding and loving and falling in love, and that's going to keep happening. We can't stop that from happening. 300 years from now, the majority of us are going to be one race, this mixed race. It's a fact. We can't stop that from happening. So how do we build towards knowing that this is going to happen and we can't stop it? See, that's where one of the biggest things that the white racist movement is that they always say the Jews will not replace us. The Jews will not replace us, because this is naturally going to happen. So they're going to blame us for something that is naturally going to happen, that we're going to mix and mold and become one tribe. 1,000 years from now, we are definitely all going to be looking back to being like the Native Americans. That's the fact of what we're going to be like. So how do we?
What you're saying resonates. What you're saying, sorry for interrupting, but what you're saying resonates because we know that, like, in the times of Mashiach, and we're definitely in that era, because it's not just a day, it's an era. It's that point where the whole world is going to realize we have differences and that's normal, but there's a lot more in common, and there's going to be ultimately this unity, living in the world where we all realize and recognize that Hashem's running the world, and we're in it, and we're serving him, and we're doing it together. So it's definitely a powerful idea that you're sharing.
And real
so
quick,
towards the end,
let me say something real.
Yeah, sure.
In the world of recovery, just to give you an example, we have, if you want to take politics, like you have J.D. Vance, whose mother is in recovery. You have Joe Biden, whose son is in recovery. You have, what's her name? Betty Ford, who was the president's wife, started recovery programs. Like, this is, it's so ingrained, and it's so part of our American society that it's such an equalizer. Because when you go to the rooms of recovery, we don't care what you look like, what you believe. We just know that you want to get another day sober and the other person wants to get another day sober. And I put all this stuff to the side, because one of the greatest things we have with each other, and this is what all human beings have with each other, but it really resonates in the groups of recovery. Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, Overeaters, 1,000 Anonymouses now. But because we are a group of people that get to go, me too. You felt that way? Me too. Here, let's talk. Let's go get coffee. I used to feel just like you felt when I came into this. And that's all around the world, and it's so American. Like, we started it here. And it's just this beautiful thing that this tribe gets to be part of. It's a beautiful thing.
It's really cool to see you, starting off your life and being so obsessed with yourself and thinking about you, and then going and saying this entire piece of connecting with others and thinking of the others and how could we relate to each other. It's really cool. So towards the end, I like to ask people a few fun questions. So first off, out of these 613 mitzvahs, there's a lot of them. Is there one that resonates with you a little more, that you appreciate a little more than the others?
I would say probably wrapping tefillin. That starts my day off right. And I don't know if you get these feelings, and I don't know others that get the feeling, but there's this sense as I'm doing my blessings and getting ready to wrap, and start to start this communication with him, by the time I get done doing it, all my prayers and blessings, and I mix in a couple of recovery prayers in my thing too, there's always at the end, there's always the sense of, I'm with you. I'm with you. And I live for that moment every morning to start my day with that. And the other part with that prayer is that after I get done, I always take about an hour-long walk on the beach as soon as I'm done. To build off my mitzvah, is I walk on the beach and I do this long prayer where I keep reminding myself the word stay, S-T-A-Y, stop thinking about yourself. And because look, an hour-long walk on a beach, you're going to start thinking about yourself. Every human being does it, unless you're so spiritual, you'll float right off of here. Everyone starts to think about themselves in an hour, right? I start thinking about, why didn't Johnny text me back? Wonder what he's thinking about me, or wonder what it is. Or yesterday I said this really cool stuff. I wonder if everyone thinks I'm cool and great. And I start to think, and it goes on. And in that moment, I always get to go, nobody's thinking about you, Frank. Stop thinking about yourself so much. Let's go back to playing and praying about how can I be of service today. And it is just one of the so my favorite, and I also really, really enjoy eating kosher. I enjoy staying kosher in my diet. It just is one of those things where Hashem is actually even part of my diet. Like I have to think about Hashem before I eat and before I give, I just love that. I love that part of my life today. So I took two. I hope you don't mind, but I took two.
You could have two. It's fair. If there's one person from history, either from the times of the Torah or someone who's no longer with us, if you could spend an hour with them, who would it be?
Okay, I'm going to take two again because I'm just two, and one is from the Torah, which is King David. When I had to go live on a boat for 2 years and hide out, and I started to really study and learn about King David and about how he had to go live in caves for a long time, I was like, if he can do it, I can do it. If he could do it, I can do it. And so I just truly started to love how he was just such a human being who got it, and then would also sometimes do his own thing and then Hashem would come in and correct him. And then he'd say, all right, and then he'd write a psalm. Like a psalm is a huge part of my life. Every morning I try to read one psalm before I start my day to figure out, and I think about him or his people writing the psalms and thinking like, okay, why is he writing this? And I love getting deep on it. And so then that, and I would definitely want to sit with Ben Franklin. So King David and Ben Franklin at the same time would be my two people I love.
Is there a story that you read or heard or happened in your life that gives you chizuk, that gives you strength?
I would have to say that it's, with all the controversy that's going on right now, the story that really encourages me is it's the start of Israel. How after the Holocaust, how people said never again, and let's come together. And then for whatever it's worth, what Israel has done and the great that it does in the world, like all the medical companies, all the high-tech companies, there's so much good that comes out of this little New Jersey state in the Middle East of people who just said, we're gonna do good for the world. And so this is the start of the state of Israel. Again, we have problems. Everyone has problems. That story alone of what happens when one tribe says, yo, we can do this. And then not only that, to build some of the most amazing things that we have on this planet today, you look back and you're like, oh, that started in Israel. Oh, this country started, or this company did that, and they were in Israel. Oh, this medical company, this medical supply company was the creator of this, and now it's saving millions of people's lives. That's from Israel? I love that. I love that story. So that's one of my stories that keeps me moving.
That's amazing. Okay, I want to finish off with this question. We're now in a period of Elul, where it's leading up to Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and it's a time where a lot of people are trying to do teshuva, try to return to God. Mm-hmm. you have, your life is a story of returning to God. You are literally a neo-Nazi, hating Jews, hating so many people of the world, and just being motivated by hate. And now anyone watching or listening could hear how much love you have in your life, how much respect you have, how much admiration for God you have. What advice would you give to someone? And I think it's for anyone. I don't know if everyone has as an extreme story as you, but like, we're all looking to be better, and we're all so ready often to give up on ourselves. Like, I'm so bad. I'm already ruined. Everything's done. What motivation? What would you tell someone who feels down in the dumps, who doesn't feel like they could come back?
Oh, for one, the first thing I always get to say is, if I can do this, anyone can do this. I mean, anyone can have a relationship, but it always starts with stepping outside of myself. So my advice would be, go look, and you don't have to run around and be a people pleaser now, neither. That can get you in your own trouble, but be ready to be of service when the call comes. Educate. Like, what I started to do is I educated myself deeply on the disease of alcoholism, so that when I talk to another guy who's struggling, I get to know. Like, the more I started to educate myself on situations that I wanted to go help with, the more I felt better about myself. And I knew that I was just there to be of service. So again, just be ready to take that call when that person calls that needs to talk, and to not be judgmental. The other thing is, is the true practice of humility. As you hear in my story, imagine if I'm sitting around a dinner table with dinner guests, I could be a story topper all day long. There ain't no one's going to beat my stories at the dinner table. But for me to shut my mouth and be quiet and let other people talk and ask other people about their lives, and not have to be like, well, let me tell you what I've done. Just speak when spoken to, be able to be of help and be of service. And I know, this has happened in my life, that Hashem takes care of everything in the background. I don't need to tell everyone how great I think I am, because if I'm going to go do something, Hashem's going to put the right people to talk to the other people to say, oh, you should talk to this guy, Frank. He really could help you right now. Like, I don't need to go out there and tell them all. There's just the way it works, the way that Hashem's got our backs, to be like, yeah, you should talk to Frank. So just practice true humbleness and true humility. And the last thing I'll say is that humility is not that I think less of myself, but I think about myself less. And if I could do that, I got this thing okay.
Really beautiful. Frank, for someone who wants to reach out to you, whether they're struggling with alcoholism or they're looking for chizuk, they're looking for strength, or whatever, I'm not even sure. I'm sure there's a lot of people who want to reach out. Where's the best place to find you?
Just reach out on just look me up on Twitter or Instagram or any of those people. And look, definitely, if anyone is struggling a little bit with their addiction or alcoholism, please, let's talk. But also, if you just want to talk about God's love, I love it. I love talking about Hashem's love and how you've witnessed it in your life and how I've witnessed it, and how we could share those moments all day long. My door's always open, and so let's talk.
Incredible. Frank, thank you so much for doing this, and keep going. I hope to have another conversation with you in another 10 years and see where life took you and see how much you grew, because I think in like every 5 years of your life, there's like an incredible like spurt of growth, and it's amazing.
Yeah. And we're in the good spurt.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you for joining our journey this week with Frank. This is our first former neo-Nazi on the program. I can say that with confidence. Well, besides Shlomi Zions. I'm kidding. Shlomi Zions is not a former neo-Nazi. If you got this far in the episode, please let us know in the comments and leave the word hope. Let us know what you think of Frank. Have you thought you were so bad that Hashem would never take you back? Our comment section is our community, and I want to hear from you. Before I get to my thoughts, thanks again to Sword to Shekel. It's a remarkable organization supporting Israel's people, businesses, and soldiers. Please donate to them. Any amount truly helps. Go to Twillory for suits, shirts, pants. You won't go wrong. Of course, head to Esrog Shopper and use code INSPIRE for the easiest way to get your Esrog this year, and you'll also get 5% off. And if you're a business who doesn't have the best software yet, you're sleeping on real opportunity to grow smartly. Check out BitBean. Now, Frank's story is a powerful testament to the transformative power of faith and the human capacity for change. Once consumed by hate as a prominent neo-Nazi skinhead, Frank lived a life filled with anger and violence. But in the darkest moments of his life, behind prison walls, he began to see the light of Hashem. Surrounded by people from all backgrounds and many people he hated, he had to face the humanity and those he was taught to hate. He connected with fellow inmates, shared conversations, began to see people as individuals rather than labels. That's when something shifted, a spark of faith, a sense that something greater was guiding him away from the hate that once defined him. Frank's journey shows us that no matter how far we've fallen, we can always find our way back to Hashem, especially in the times it's so important to forgive others, but maybe even more important to forgive ourselves. As it says, "V'ahavta l'recha kamocha," love your neighbor as yourself. That means we need to show ourselves the same compassion we show others. Frank's story is a living proof that true change begins when we let go of the past and embrace the light within. His journey reminds us that Hashem's grace is always there, even for those who feel lost and unworthy. And I want to talk about someone else in the story, that Jewish man that gave Frank a job, who literally changed his whole perception of what Jews are. He wasn't an Orthodox Jew, but he was a good Jew, and he was someone who was a straight person. And because of him, he changed the trajectory of Frank's life and how he relates to Jews, Hashem, God, and all people. And I think it's so easy for us in life to sometimes see us as the Frank in the story, like, oh, I have to shift my life and change my life. And often that's the case. But so many times we never know who is gonna be that person that we're gonna impact. And I'm sure that store owner was thinking like, yeah, I treat everyone like this. And it wasn't a big deal for him, but he literally changed worlds. Remember, inspiration is everywhere. L'chaim.
Living L'chaim.